computerized exercise systems. One is a arm leg machine. We can adjust that for single joint testing. This other machine here is called a multifunction because it will test multiple joints, such as a bench press or a seated press or squats or things like that. Now, this equipment is manufactured by Aerial Dynamics, and it also comes with a complete software package and computer system that will operate it. But the system will also operate a force platform, which I just tripped on. This force plate can measure the forces generated in ground reaction experiments like on vertical jump or things like that. What we're going to do right now is we're going to show how a typical strength test would be done, and we can see how the software will generate the data analysis afterwards. So what we've got Fred here ready to do is a sitting press, and okay, Fred, why don't you turn around the other way? As a result of the test, we can look at several things. One is a plot of the forces that were applied. We can examine the force time curves of any of these by, like if there may have been some jerky motions in when you were doing it, you were working very hard. We can expand this and look at this very closely. There was some jerkiness going in there. We can pick peak forces. This happens to be in newtons. We can look at a fatigue table, which shows a little bit of decrement in fatigue. We can also look at a table of certain values, like the peak force was 682 newtons. Average value, peak power in Newton meters per second. And so these can be stored as it's a data in a database, and we can compare it after a training program, and we can compare it among athletes as well.
Do you have those data base yet, or?
The data will be in the database for each individual, and can be accessed either through Lotus or
can
a
you compare
printout.
it to them?
Well, you can compare it within the person before, during, and after a training program. You can use it diagnostically to determine what areas of weakness they need to work on. Or you can compare it among athletes who are in the similar position on the team or something like that. So
any stats from this from this machine that they've done before?
Well, in some cases we just use students, so they're more or less random testing just to demonstrate. We haven't used it for. We have tested a couple athletes to determine kind of what their peak forces were in various exercises, like the squat, the bench press, the military
do you
press.
kind of detect injuries too on this?
Well, you can detect injuries. You can also detect level of rehabilitation. You can do unilateral unilateral side testing, and looking, let's say, at the function of a shoulder joint with one arm. And as the person starts becoming more and more rehabilitated, you're going to see that the rates of tension development as well as the peak forces are going to start improving. And so the thing about athletic performance is that you have to establish this database. And you also have to establish multiple testing within the same athlete to kind of get a picture before and after an injury, and also through levels of rehabilitation. So this is how this would be able to collect that kind of data. What we're trying to work on with this is to be able to get a printout of the digital data on this, so that we can examine that in more mathematical terms.
Does it have the ability to, once you get a database established, to do a ranking? Can we do that on separate?
Well, the data is available on Lotus spreadsheet. It'll output to a Lotus spreadsheet. It'll output to just a regular file, ASCII file. You can pull that ASCII file into any program you want to write. So we would probably write programs in Quick Basic or in C, which then you could set up your own analysis. But I think as far as reducing data, you have a ton of data just in these two pictures.
Right.
And you would want to reduce it to some discrete parameters that you want to look at, like that table. The table isolated certain parameters that you want to look at. Otherwise, you'd have a mountain of data. So that's how that would work. Right here is a force plate, and I think that in terms of team handball, I recognize the fact that a person does have some leaping ability, but more so, the person has the ability to leap and shoot at the same time. And obviously, when you're in the air and you have to put a power, you don't get the benefit of the ground reaction force that you would have if you were pitching a ball. But anyway, the force plate, get out of here, and we'll get into another aspect of the let's see if this is turned on.
The data points, okay, so they can be used for a learning point. They can be used to compare within the same athlete. Once you have a database, you can compare among other athletes. Do you feel this could also be used to predict injuries?
Again, I think that this is an instrument. And like any diagnostic instrument like MRI or CT scan, the real expertise in interpreting the data rests with the professional person. And so as they are able to do it, like I envision the coach, the athletic trainer, the strength and conditioning coach, as they have access to better recording instrumentation, they'll begin to go on a learning curve themselves and to be able to relate performance to certain measurable parameters. And it's these measurable parameters that they can interpret. But it's going to be in the hands of a professional person to do that. This is a force plate. Here we have three different directions. We have X and Y, and then of course the Z direction. And if Klaus would hit the space bar, I'll show you what a vertical jump would look like. Yeah, along here. We have obviously the vertical force pattern here, and then of course I was in outer space for a while, and then I landed. This is in the Y direction, which shows what force I had this way, and the X direction, which forces I had that way. This works very well for when you want to watch somebody run. They may have a gait problem, or let's say somebody's getting over knee surgery. You want to see how their foot patterns are.
And this gives us more than the normal plate that we use.
Yeah. For vertical jump, you could diagnose along with video. You could diagnose whether somebody is coordinated or whatever. Oftentimes, I see your players taking off of one foot, and they'll be taking off like this and going. So
that has been really the main problem to measure those things. So we have been really into innovations and trying to find how we could do this, because if you use the normal plate here, you jump straight up on both legs. You can use one leg, but you can never use that force that we do. We take 3 steps and we go up and jump. And if you should land at the same spot, it's almost impossible. So
well, what we could be doing is we would put this flush with the floor, and then we have a handball player run up to it, take off of 1 foot, and then throw for a target. We could videotape all that,
And then we could measure
and we could
how much
begin
force
to start
it
looking
is
at
to push off.
the angular momentum
Yeah.
in the air, because it's really becomes an angular momentum problem, because there's conservation of angular momentum when you're off the ground. And so the way that you, in Newton's law of action-reaction, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the harder you throw, it has to create a counter movement in the other parts of your body. So knowing how to coordinate the counter movement allows you to put more impulse on the ball, change the momentum.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, and so that would
The
be
main
something that
problem
we would.
should be though that how long time does it really take for you to do the test? Because whenever you do those test things, you need to have a pretty fast test that goes fast so that you don't take too long time.
Right.
This sounds good though, if you can do it.
Well,
like
the
that.
3D takes a long time to digitize, but things like this, where you can get the forces, when you can get analog forces, you are able to reduce the analysis time.
Exactly.
So you want to get to the point where you reduce the analysis to the simplest amount of parameters. Otherwise, when we go 3D, and I can switch out of this now and go to a three-dimensional analysis. Okay, here's the Taiwanese national shot put champion. I videotaped him 2 summers ago, and essentially we're going to transform each of these views. Transform them all. Okay, here we have a side view of the shot putter. Here we have a top view of the shot putter. Here we have the front and the back view. Now, when we have this on a person, now we spent about an hour with the coach and the athlete sitting here looking at this over and over and over again. And as the coach was able to see how the shot putter was doing things, he could communicate to the athlete and show where he may be doing something wrong. So what we would do then is we could use the forward motion to look at the shot putter. We can go in reverse. We can also any one of these frames we can do as a single frame. So like if we wanted to isolate this one frame, we could blow it up and make it bigger. We can also do what's called multiple, in which we have the stick figures of the motion. And
So how do you do that? You take him and then you.
I had to then three-dimensionally analyze from 2 camera views.
Yeah.
Basically about 17 data points, and there was about, I'd say, maybe 75 to 100 frames. So in all, it took about an hour to digitize one sequence on 2 cameras.
So for him, what help did he get?
Well,
And what
let
can
me
you say
let
about
me go over this with you, and I'll show you, because the analysis takes a little bit more detail. Yes.
Now, if I understand this correctly, this is 4 different views of one actual
Sequence.
sequence.
Right. Now we took it from 2 views, and the 2 views were about 45 degrees apart. But once we combined the 2 views into one transformed series of 3D coordinates, then we now have it in real space. And we can actually rotate the axes. I don't know how to do that quite yet, but we can rotate the axes and basically look at them from any view we want to. Now, this is basically a stick figure kinematic type of thing, qualitative. But what we can do now is we can take that same thing and we can go to a graph mode. And we can do the linear velocity of the shot put, just looking at that one aspect. Okay. So we're basically just be looking at the shot put. You know, that may be one parameter that we're interested in. Now, it makes sense that if a shot putter is going to go across the circle, you don't want to have that shot put stop and then restart. So you want a gradual progression of velocity, right? And so this is the velocity in the x and y direction. This is the velocity in the x and y direction of the shot put. Now, in the x direction, you can see that it's steadily increasing its velocity. In the y direction, the athlete starts down here, comes up, and then goes like that. So they're getting, in this phase right here, they're getting that counter movement that normally exists in athletics, where you bring the ball back before you throw it, or you drop down before you jump up. And so this is one way that we can start looking at various parameters and just analyze them. And it can be very complicated, but as you do more of them, like on a clinical basis, you become more in tune to what you want to look for. So this is just a very brief.
I'm Dr. Willoughby. This part of the laboratory at the United States Sports Academy contains the equipment necessary to evaluate human performance. Specifically, what you see here is our cardiovascular endurance capacity protocol, in which we have the ability to assess the individual's 12-lead electrocardiogram. In addition, we have the ability to analyze oxygen uptake, VO2 max, other type of metabolic parameters, with the apparatus over on the other side of the subject. Subject breathes in and out of the hose. The machine has a capability to be able to analyze and quantify the amount of oxygen, CO2 in the inspired and expired air. In addition to the 12-lead EKG, we have the ability to be able to evaluate cardiac function during exercise. This is important because due to the demands of exercise, the electrical activity on the heart may be affected in some way or another. We use the EKG as an important evaluative tool, not necessarily in diagnostics, but yes, we do in some sort. But however, we cannot make the diagnosis of any cardiac abnormality. That would be in the hands of the physician. However, we have the ability to detect possible abnormalities and be able to direct the individual on for further medical treatment. As far as athletic performance with this type of protocol, it becomes very important because of the treadmill protocols used. They have the ability to assess performance by increasing in grade, elevation, and speed of the treadmill every 3 minutes. And in doing so, it works a person up to a certain intensity that they can be able to, or we can be able to determine athletic performance, specifically cardiovascular function. Also during the test, we normally assess the individual's blood pressure, and the machine itself keeps a continuous track of the individual's heart rate during the test. This type of test is normally one that we do if we are wanting to evaluate two different types of parameters. One is that we can use the test for diagnostic purposes in conjunct with the physician if we're trying to assess or determine different types of cardiovascular problems that might be concomitant with cardiovascular disease. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, we can also use it as an athletic performance test, and in doing so, we can be able to predict different types of athletic parameters, possibly being able to predict or assess athletic performance. And from this information, we can feel more confident about designing and prescribing safe and effective exercise prescriptions, hopefully with the purpose of improving athletic performance. Okay. This portion of the Human Performance Laboratory contains apparatus necessary to evaluate body composition, specifically what we refer to as a hydrostatic or an underwater weigh procedure. This procedure involves submerging an individual completely underwater, and during that particular time, the individual will expire all the air that they can out of their body while underwater. Also during this time, we will weigh the individual, hence the scale that you see here. This scale will give us a representation of how much that person weighs underwater, taking into consideration that individuals who have more body fat will be more buoyant, or in other words, they will float more in the water than those individuals who have less body fat, meaning that those people would be heavier on the scale because they would be more dense, thus heavier under the water while they're submerged. This particular test will give us several variables that are important in athletic performance and other variables that are health related. One, it will give us percent of the person's body fat, and doing so will give us the amount of fat weight a person has distributed over their body, and it'll also give us the amount of lean weight that that person has. Lean weight meaning the weight, how much that person would weigh if they had no fat whatsoever distributed over their body. So that gives us the necessary indicators to be able to hopefully assess the person's fitness levels at that particular time, and also be able to possibly predict fitness parameters in the future. And dealing with athletic performance, it is a way to be able to assess those types of variables, that if we determine an individual's body composition through exercise, we can hopefully improve those variables and thus possibly improve performance in the future.
People resume SSA Athletic Healthcare Program. Our full service program emphasizes full health status and full play level. The specific emphases are modality management. A modality is a healing agent, such as taping, electric stim, sound, ultrasound, reconditioning and conditioning exercise involved with the injured athlete, sports nutrition, and finally, education and counseling. I'm going to move today from station to station. This is going to be station 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, and exemplify some of the modalities that we use, including exercise. This is the Shuttle 2000 over here, which is an exercise device for evaluation and also rehab. The first station here is, of course, the ankle tape. I'm not going to place all of the strips on, but we're going to assume that the ligament on this side is sprained from turning the ankle, which is the most prevalent injury in sports. The first thing that we do is we put heel and lace pads, on the lace and the heel and back, which I won't apply today. I'll take you from the pre-wrap, protect the athlete's skin, on through. And of course, protect the hair and protect the skin against conditions. And we safely anchor at the bottom. And I'll only put one on. one of the anchors on to give a good stable support to the tape job. Okay, and then this strip right here, okay, this strip right here, which I pull around, is pulling the athlete out of the mechanism of injury, as we call it. Okay, and as I teach my students, okay, I cut it off just a little bit short so I can watch what happens to the ankle. I'm pulling it out of the mechanism of injury, okay, and then anchoring down. Now this shows, okay, I won't complete the tape job, okay, but there's several other strips that will be used, okay, in this tape job, anchoring it, anchoring those, okay. Now moving on, this was, as I mentioned, the ankle sprain. One of the modalities that I mentioned, the healing agent, in which we tape an athlete when he re-enters the field of play to protect him against re-injury. Okay, this station right here, okay, is to protect against re-injury of a sprained thumb. Okay, and of course we bring the athlete into out of the mechanism of injury, which is, okay, hyperabduction extension. Okay, so we bring them out of that in a safe range of motion. Okay, and of course the pre-wrap again to protect the hair and also give a good base of support for the tape. Okay, now you can tape on the skin if you have the athlete shaved, but most of my athletes like their hair, so I let them allow them to have their hair. Okay, good base of support with the anchors. Okay, and then okay, I'll apply the figure eight. Figure eight, good base of support. Okay, and from there, okay, I'll show you the cross strips. Okay, protect the athlete. Now we know that we use figure eights, but I'll show you one that is probably easier to demonstrate. What I do is I bring over 3 cross strips, okay, which brings the athlete into that out of that mechanism of injury after I have put on the figure eights already. Okay, and of course, you know, on up, okay, to cover the what we call the MCP joint right here. Okay, and we're protecting, you know, this very important joint down here called the saddle joint, and also the MCP joint are the ones that are usually involved in a thumb tape, in a thumb sprain. Okay, and of course, running it around. Okay, no windows. Okay, we would be. Okay, and not a complete tape job, but just to demonstrate what we do. Remember, everybody, what we're doing here with the taping is to prevent re-injury once the athlete re-enters at full health status, to get him to the full play level again. Those two things are different. Okay, moving on to station 3. This is called the Shuttle 2000. Okay, this was a donation, by the way, to the Sports Academy, and I just like to say that we are the greatest school of sports science in the world. Okay, if we don't believe it, nobody else will. But we just happen to believe that. And we do have companies who are looking to us to exemplify their machinery. Now, this is a closed chain exercise. What it means is that the foot is against the pad. Okay, that over here, this exercise over in the Cybex, okay, is an open chain, whereby the foot is off of the floor. Okay, now there are different forces involved with those two different exercises. Early on, especially early on, Trainer Joe here, you know, uses the closed chain to protect the athlete against the shear forces, we call it. Okay, now Ken, let's have you go, you know, out and a totalize. Okay, all the way out and back, out and back. Now turn it in, out. Okay, to work the whole ankle joint. Okay, now out. Okay, and of course you can revolve those too. Okay, now what I want you to do is now we're going to do a closed chain or an open chain exercise with this plyometrics, working on the stretch reflex and increasing the power of the athlete to contract the muscle. Okay, here we go. Out. Now we have plyometrics on boxes. Okay, and of course everybody, you know that this can be a dangerous exercise in jumping off boxes. This is a safe way to go. Okay, moving on. Cybex machine. Okay, with this machine, we can record the force and power output of the athlete. And of course, we're dealing with specifically the quadricep muscles. Okay, and we can test the athlete, and we can also, in early rehab especially, rehab the athlete as well. Evaluation and rehab, okay? All right, Trey, and we have it set at, let me set it at 90 RPM. Okay, here we go, and go ahead. And as you can see, we have the limb stabilized, okay? We do not have the belt here, okay? Usually we have a belt here, to stabilize the body, to make sure that this is the only one that's moving. Okay, and what we have here is a measurement in foot-pounds. Okay, and of course we see, the dip. We have the, in fact, we have the extensors athlete is to full health status. Okay, and we set goals along the way. Okay, we're going to move on back to the modality centers from here. Let's move on right now. Resume. Okay, now this is the modality center, everybody, where we have electrotherapeutic equipment as well as hydrotherapy, hydrocollator, heat, as well as cold therapy. Okay, and trainer Fred here, okay, which we're simulating is an athlete. He's an athletic trainer himself, student here at the academy, turning on the whirlpool. Now, what we have the athlete do is we have him draw ABCs. Hydrotherapy, everybody. We have a contrast. We have the cold and the hot. Up front with the injuries to prevent excessive swelling. And most of my circulation, we have him use the cold whirlpool. Chronic injuries, these are the more acute injuries. Chronic injuries, then we want the pumping action, constriction, dilation, etc. 2x2, like a 2 minute. Okay. Trainer, why don't you draw for me one set of ABCs? Okay, and that's what he's going in the water. Okay, and notice everybody, as he's doing that, he's using all the ranges of motion, A and B and C, all the way to Z, okay? Using a very nice, continuous, flowing, rhythmic motion. Okay, now Fred, why don't you sit on here, okay? We'll make as if this is a chronic injury. Moving from 2 minutes, okay, in the cold, now 2 minutes in the, I like the even ratios, 2 to 2, okay? We may do it twice, okay, to pump and to decrease swelling and symptoms. Okay, and of course he's right here exemplifying, that motion. The most important modality that we have is movement. All of the other modalities is to get that athlete to move safely in the non-painful range of motion, the full range of motion, and full re-entry. We have also electrotherapy equipment up here. Okay, and various other things we do, ice cups that we teach the athlete. One of the areas, one of the last areas, most important, we have the skeletons right there. That guy's a little skinny right there. Okay, education and counseling. We show the athletes the anatomy and physiology, kinesiology of the joint. Okay, because he's the most active part, the most important and most active part of the hip and tick.
What's the matter with me? He's right.
I'm sure he's always right.
If you happen to remember the name of man number 6, give us a call. Good luck with the case.
No, good luck to you, Mr. Scanlon. That's the subpoena. I'd really like to know who man number 6 was.
Well, they're not going to tell us.
From your gun dealer?
He's ducking my calls, but he's usually there on Friday nights counting his receipts.
Huh. Let's hope he's had a good week.
Anything.
Wait until I ask. And that guy you sold the Desert Eagle to, has he been back here?
I never should have talked to you in the first place. No, let me out of this.
That gun killed Winslow Keene. Now, if that guy calls here, You're gonna call me. What's that? Expecting anyone? Get back.
Hi there.
Whoa! Thanks a lot. That's the guy who sold the gun to Keene's murderer.
Yeah, well, for all I know, he's just a guy you play pool with.
What were you doing following me?
Look at it this way. If you are chasing a killer, you're going to need me. Because, baby, I had you cold in that pool hall without breaking a sweat. You do the legwork, and I'll take care of the bad guys.
Oh, no. No. You and I are not gonna be buddies.
See you around, lawyer.
Lansky,
It's Wallace.
what have you heard?
I could get killed talking to you. Look, this guy called again. He says he wants another piece.
Well, he knows you can identify him. You better stay clear of him.
Look, if I give you a name, it's worth something, right? Because I got to get $10,000 to get lost.
If it's the right name.
Look, meet me in the pool hall in 30 minutes and bring the money.
Wait a second. That's not a good idea.
Good evening.
Uh-oh. I didn't order a lawyer. Did you order a lawyer, Fred? Sure. Extra large. To go. Oh, would you hand me that right here?
Another stunt?
Stunt? What stunt? We like girls. No, you're right, Mr. Mason. We're giving Rip 179.
She recognized the hitman's girlfriend, and
Kathy said they grew up in the same neighborhood together. The girlfriend's name is Doris Lester. She's a prostitute.
Try it, Perry.